Should we care about parasites, and if so, why?
They literally have worms or, massive tapeworms or things that are crawling out of their anus, and their gut health just isn't right. Really what you're trying to create is a terrain within your body that is not hospitable towards parasites, okay? And we're going to teach you how to do that today.
Seems like parasite cleanse is all the rage on TikTok these days.
I think it is. A lot of people want to get that stuff out.
Should we care about parasites, and if so, why?
That's a really good question, Nick.
And it's one that we're going to explore on this week's episode
of the Be Well Now podcast.
So you're Dr. Ron Dummar. I'm Nick. I'm a patient of yours. Before we start, why should people care what you have to say?
Well, I have been practicing here in Heber for 18 years now.
Heber City,
been a little
Utah.
while.
Heber City, Utah. Shout
I've
out.
been practicing functional medicine. My background is in physical medicine, but also Chinese medicine. So a significant portion of Chinese medicine training is internal medicine. And that was one of the reasons I loved it a lot. Often people, a lot of my colleagues, they were more fascinated by the acupuncture, which I also do. And I really love the tool of utilizing acupuncture and its capability. But for me, it was the internal medicine, the herbalism, that struck my interest, and I just dove into it and became immersed in those herbs. And I realized that literally these herbals was the main go-to frontline medicine for the largest nation on earth, you could say, the most highest density population of people, that helped them get through pandemics and illnesses and sicknesses for millennia.
Tried and tested and true.
Yeah.
And there's proof in the pudding, so to speak.
There's proof in the pudding. If you want case study after case study to the billions, it's Chinese medicine.
So parasites.
Mm-hmm.
What do parasites have to do with Chinese medicine, and what do you want to talk about today?
Well, I think something that I like to cover in general with people is, first of all, certain myths, certain misconceptions. And I think that would be good for us to cover today with regards to parasites. How do I know I have it? And wouldn't I know that I have it is a common question that I get. And then also, how is it transferred? How is it? Don't I usually just get it from foreign travel, right? Isn't it just from drinking contaminated water outside the United States? And then
you can freak out on this stuff. If you look online, parasites, like all the thumbnails on YouTube, it's like, do I have a worm in my brain?
Yes.
Is there a worm, crawling around inside of my body somewhere? So it can be a little freaky.
Yeah, and I guess one of the most comforting things I can say to you is really what you're trying to create is a terrain within your body that is not hospitable towards parasites, okay? And we're going to teach you how to do that today. Also, I want to cover, if we can, briefly just what it might look like from labs, because there's another misconception that people often say, well, there's no way to test for parasites. There are definitely ways that we can do tests to detect parasites in the body, and there are also hints or clues within blood labs that we can see whether we need to do further testing. So, and then last of all, what we want to cover is natural medicine, herbal medicine's capability and ability to be able to help your body to create a terrain that is inhospitable for these parasites.
If there are myths out there, they're probably for a reason. So let's say you travel to a third world country, then you start to have some symptoms. It might be logical to assume, and I don't know what the symptoms are, you can talk about it. It might be logical to assume, hey, I got parasites.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, again, they travel to a foreign country, they eat something, right? They end up with bowel-related issues, digestion, diarrhea, right? They get sick, right, when they're away. And they come home and their gut health just isn't right. And gut health is actually a big part of making sure that the terrain within the gut and the GI is just right so that parasites aren't going to thrive. Really what we're talking about with infections at large is not just whether or not I have something within me, but whether or not that, let's say, parasite or pathogen is presently overwhelming the system. Okay, so that's really what we're looking at. All of us have actually pathogens within our body. Like we have strep, we have staph. We have that currently, presently, all the time in our body. Okay, but the question is whether or not that's an infection. I'm not a walking infection, but I do have staph and I have strep in my body. It's just not in an infectious way right now. And so if either in my throat or in my skin or a variety of different places, that pathogen becomes overabundant or overwhelming to the system, like a weed in your garden that grows out of control, that's an infection.
Got it.
And so that's really what we're looking for. We want to contain whatever it is, the pathogen, essentially that in your instance that we brought home from our travel.
So another myth would be that you can only get it from third world country is one myth. Another one would be like, if I had a parasite, I'd know it.
Yes.
I mean, because there's a part of you that knows. You got to listen to that part of you that like is talking to you, and you're like, I'd know if I had a parasite. I wouldn't even know. What does that even mean, though?
Right. Well, so I've oftentimes when people are thinking, if I had a parasite, I would know it. They're thinking of, excessive diarrhea that just overtakes them, or they literally have worms, or massive tapeworms, or things that are crawling out of their anus. Right. Like that's what people are thinking of when they think of parasites. And
I just heard a soundbite. That should be the
I know, right there. Yes. You can clip it up right there.
So tapeworms are a parasite, though?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they do crawl out of said orifice?
So there are definitely, there are images that we don't wish to repeat, right?
Okay.
And that's where people's brains usually go to when they think of parasites is, some sort of worm or some sort of organism that, essentially works its way out of their GI tract.
Got it.
Okay?
Got it.
And that's not really how it is all the time. It can be one of those, right? It can be, absolutely. Those are definitely options. But oftentimes what I find is with patients when they have parasites, it can show in a way, it can show as food sensitivities, right? Or it can show for some patients as fatigue, where it's just chronic fatigue, but all their other markers look okay, and they're being told by their care provider, hey, there's nothing wrong with you, you're fine. But they have this just chronic brain fog and fatigue. And one of the reasons for that, and we'll talk about this in a minute too, but is because when you have a parasite, what do we know parasites do? They literally live off the host. That's what a parasite is. It's designed to live off of you, which means it's taking your nutrients. So it's taking your B vitamins, it's taking your minerals, it's taking the things that are needed for your cells to function appropriately, right? And so literally, if you have cellular dysfunction or metabolic dysfunction, it's very possible that there's some sort of parasitic lesion that's also contributing to that dysfunction.
Any other myths we want to talk about in the parasite department? Testing for parasites.
So people often say that there's no way that you can test for it. That there's no way to find out if you really have parasites. There's no tests that are really accurate enough. We do actually have stool tests that can go through and tell you exactly what organisms are in your stool, right? And therefore in your gut, in your GI. And if there's a dysbiosis, which is an unbalanced bacteria or an unbalanced pathogenic contributing factor within your gut, then we need to balance that out. And we have a variety of different protocols that we work people through depending on what we see in their labs. But the other thing that we can do is even just with basic annual labs. With your basic annual labs, you can see signs, little clues that parasites will leave behind. And again, remember I said that they'll take your nutrients, right? So if it begins to take your nutrients, this is very possible. Somebody who is struggling or has struggled with anemias, with low blood count, with hemoglobin, reduced hemoglobin, or a disruption in their red blood cells, right? In mean corpuscular volume or the macrocytic volume, right? So it's like this overall volume of your cell, if it's changing and we see it fluctuating in a dysfunctional way, then we can know, we can suggest, there may be, that doesn't guarantee it, but there may be, because we're seeing potential signs of a parasitic lesion, that something's taking your nutrients, right? And so we can see these signs also in the basophils. Sometimes your basophils will be elevated, which says, hey, it's not a guarantee. It's not a sure shot of, oh yeah, you definitely have parasites. It's a sign of, right? And so we're seeing elevated basophils, which says, hey, there's some sort of infectious thing happening or inflammatory process occurring within about, I'd say, 10% of patients who actually have parasitic infection. There's about 10% of them that will show elevated eosinophils. So eosinophils are elevated in response to allergic. It's like a part of the immune system that responds in allergic responses. Okay. And so if your eosinophils are elevated, that can be a sign. But really you start putting, I don't like individual lab analytes on its own as indicators. I like to say, okay, let's put a few of them together. So if we have macrocytic volume, macrocytic hemoglobin, we see monocytes, we see basophils, all those are elevated or all those are in a dysfunctional pattern, then I'll look at it and say, ooh, this actually spells parasites to me.
I think to me that says get your blood labs done and analyzed by someone you trust.
100%.
Because that can tell a story. And then when you do that every 6 months or every year, then if you have a good practitioner, they can help analyze that story. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
You do here at
Absolutely. That's what we do. When we do your labs, we like to do at least a yearly or an annual draw on our patients. With many of our patients, we're actually managing them every 3 to 6 months, depending on what we're working on or what we find. The idea is about optimizing health, right? We're trying to create an optimal terrain within the gut, an optimal terrain within the body and the organ systems of the body itself, so that the patient can thrive, knowing that it's not like you'll never have a parasite again, or you'll never be exposed to a virus, or you'll never have an infection, right, that rises up again. It's just that we're creating a terrain that's going to be able to recover as quickly as possible and return to normalcy or optimal state again as quickly as possible.
So should we just talk about how parasites actually do spread? Because I think that's something people want to know.
Yeah. So I think, again, going back to one of those misconceptions. I often hear people like, well, I haven't traveled, I haven't been outside the United States, so how would I have a parasite? As though, we built this massive force field around the United States where we apparently don't have any parasites. So here are some signs that you may, now this doesn't mean you do, but you may have or may contract a parasite if you consume or have consumed undercooked or raw meat, right? And that could include sushi, of course, pork, beef, any of that, right? If you work in the soil without gloves.
Aren't you supposed to get your hands in the soil?
Oh, 100% you are. So, and I'm not saying don't.
Okay.
I'm just saying if you do, right? So it's, where do microbes live? Where do microbes harbor? Where do they breed? This is where they live, in the dirt. So it's not like you're not supposed to be a part of that. It's not like you're not supposed to get your hands dirty or be a part of your environment. It's just that that's an opportunistic vector of spread.
So if you get your hands dirty, should you wash them at the end of your session?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, wash them, and with water, with clean water from a good source that you trust, right? Ideally. Now, often, even swimming in a mountain lake or stream, obviously drinking from a mountain lake or stream or getting that, ingesting it in some way, can spread for you as well. And yes, travel outside the United States can increase potentially your likelihood of doing that. But I would say the reason for that is because the microbes that we're a lot less familiar to, balancing in our gut, in our GI, in our biome, those microbes are found more often outside the United States. Whereas within the United States, we've already kind of adapted to the most part to some of the parasitic lesions and parasites that we might come in contact with. But even certain areas of the country, if you go to the south and you're from the northwest, there's going to be a different terrain that you have to adapt to. Some patients fly a lot throughout the country, and if they're constantly moving throughout different places of the country, they're going to have to really support their immune system and help their bodies, because they will be exposed to different terrain that they're going to have to try to balance it with their immune system and their immune responses. So if you have a pet, this is one that a lot of people don't really think of a lot, but if you have a pet, you work with horses or you work with animals, it's very likely that you have exposure to parasites. So
very likely.
Very likely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what do I do if I have a pet and I like to have them like, I don't
Give
have a pet.
Kisses, pet.
But yeah, people like their pet.
That's what happens.
I've had that in the past,
So you create a terrain, right? Let's create a terrain. That's the idea, is we want to create a terrain that is as supportive as possible for your immune system. You want to create a robust immune response, and you want to have the terrain and the bacterial culture. We call it interconsuming in Chinese medicine. If you look at the yin-yang sign, there's a little bit of yin and yang, and there's a little bit of yang and yin. And part of what that represents is interconsuming or interconsumption. There's always a little bit of interconsuming with the yin and yang principle in Chinese medicine. This is the same with bacteria. It's the same with pathogens. It's the same in our environment with the fire, right? With the water. You look at the way we do have fire seasons, and we have wet seasons, dry seasons, right? We have all these different seasons, and they are somewhat interconsuming, but also there's a delicate balance in that interconsumption. If the consumption gets off, then it becomes diseased, right? If the balance gets off, that's what we would call disease in an environmental situation. And so we want to create balance of the consuming and interconsuming parts. All right. So that's what we're going to do, is introduce herbals, introduce different plants, different foods that could be beneficial, that will be beneficial to supporting the body and the immune system to be resilient in its balancing of the pathogenic factors.
Okay.
So before one gets too high and becomes more of the king of the castle, your immune system says, hold on, let's send out these white blood cells. Let's send out these eosinophils. Let's send out these macrophages to just break it down and destroy some of those pathogenic factors and pull them into the lymphatic system, clear them, and evacuate them from the body. And that's your natural detoxification process. It's done through your immune system, right?
Okay.
So how do we do that? What are our natural immune fighters? Well, one of our natural immune fighters is artemisinin. Artemisinin Qinghao is a herbal that I've loved. I've been in love with this herbal. It's an infatuation for a long time. I love it because it's so powerful. It's anti-inflammatory. It's anti-febrile, so we use it in febrile type conditions as well. But it's anti-parasitic. And this Qinghao artemisinin has been shown in Africa to help with the fight against parasitic lesions in African nations. Okay, so there was a lot of discussion regarding a specific compound called quinine. Do you remember that quinine during COVID? Where people are like, oh, get quinine. If you get quinine, this will totally knock it out. It'll help. It's a strong anti-inflammatory. Well, quinine is also a compound that's found pretty robustly in artemisinin. Okay, and so it can and does have an impact to reduce inflammation and to balance out pathogenic factors. We use it as an antiparasitic in our formulas here. So that's one. It's a really good one. Another one is black walnut. So black walnut, the whole of the black walnut is a really good regulator of the gut and the GI. We use a formula sometimes too called biocidin, which has garlic and black walnut and a variety of herbals in there as a biofilm disruptor. So sometimes these parasites, what they'll do is they'll get themselves embedded into the biofilm, which is a film that covers the layer or the lining of the gut and the GI. And it takes a lot to try to clear and get rid of that biofilm. But a lot of pathogenic factors can hide out there. And then when something is consumed that they don't like, boom, they'll retreat into it, and it's like a protective layer. But then when like sugar or pasta, those things that they really do like, they'll come out and gorge themselves, right?
Gotcha.
And then that's what creates a lot of the disruption in the GI and the bowel distension. And people are like, oh my gosh, I can't eat this. I used to be able to eat this. I can't eat sugar. I can't eat these processed foods. Otherwise I'll bloat or have these GI disruption concerns. So we use biocidin, but black walnut is one of the key ingredients, and we really like to use black walnut when we're fighting essentially parasites.
Anything else?
Yes, there are other things. Pumpkin seeds.
Oh, pumpkin seeds.
Yeah,
just seeds of a pumpkin.
Yeah, pumpkin seeds. You can roast them.
Raw?
I love
Okay.
I love to roast them and then consume them. So obviously it's not the fall time yet, but usually in the fall we'll do our jack-o'-lanterns and carve pumpkins. And if you take all those seeds out and put them on a tray and put them in the oven and roast them for a little bit, and you can have, you can put a little bit of seasoning on them with salt and pepper or something as well. And they're actually quite nice. But consuming pumpkin seeds on a regular basis, I would say if you are going to get pumpkin seeds, make sure that you're not going to get pumpkin seeds, again, that have a long list of ingredients in the flavoring that they're putting on it, if there's flavoring. Okay, so make sure you're getting a really good sourced pumpkin seed, or that you're making it yourself at your home. Okay, but pumpkin seeds are very good. They can contain a number of compounds that fight against pathogenic factors and do a great job at balancing our gut and our GI.
You know what I love is I started drinking this before meals. Is apple cider vinegar.
Yes,
like a tablespoon in
so
some water.
Good.
That's actually good for anti-parasitic, or what? Tell me about that.
100%. Yeah, apple cider vinegar.
Why did we not start this earlier? The ACV talk. Let's go.
Yeah, when I was a kid, my dad used to always have us take a quarter teaspoon to a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar in water. So we would drink it at night before we went to bed. And I noticed that it was an interesting pattern. I was like,
Dummar?
So my dad's pattern was, you've seen my Big Fat Greek Wedding where it's like Windex. That's his cure-all.
Okay.
Have you seen that? It's like, anyway, there's a wart on this lady's hand. She's complaining about it. He's like, Windex! And he's like, starts spraying it, right?
Okay.
So my dad, it's like, hey, apple cider vinegar, it's a cure-all. It kills everything. Well, there is some argument to that, because the apple cider vinegar is going to lower the pH, which is raising the acidity of the stomach, which is going to have a greater likelihood of neutralizing pathogenic factors. So if, let's say you're going to go out for sushi. Great time to say, let's start this before we go. We're going to take a shot of apple cider vinegar. Okay. Another thing that is actually beneficial, and you'll notice that they serve it with sushi oftentimes, is horseradish and ginger. All right. So consuming ginger and horseradish is creating an environment generally where parasites and pathogens are not welcome. All right. And we know ginger generally is a GI calming and gut settling herb, as it is anyway. But the ginger and the horseradish is there for a reason. So you should use it. Right? Use it with, if you can. Some people, the horseradish is too much for them. It's too spicy or whatever. But it is anti-parasitic. Okay? But yeah, the apple cider vinegar it helps with the acidity of the stomach. And it, again, what we're doing is creating an inhospitable environment. So if we can raise or lower the acidity, lower the pH and raise the acidity is what we're trying to do. So when you lower pH, it's actually increasing acidity.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what we're trying to do in the gut. And again, think about that before you go out, or you're going to consume something, or if you're traveling. Apple cider vinegar is such an easy thing to take with you at almost everywhere you go.
So a quarter teaspoon, you almost wouldn't even taste that in water with kids.
Yeah, you're not.
I do a tablespoon and I can taste that. That's more than a lot of people.
That's a little stronger, yeah.
Are into, but
if I have a sore throat, I'll gargle with apple cider vinegar sometimes, and so I'll just gargle with it, and I'll mix our Cool Coat throat formula, and I'll put a little apple cider vinegar with it, and I'll gargle with it. Gargling is actually a really good tool that you can use as well, because it resets the autonomic nervous system, the stress, the fight or flight in the body. So if you're looking for a stress relieving, and this is a little extra tidbit, not necessarily focused on parasites, but the immune system, anytime the immune system is upregulated, we have a dysfunction in the autonomic nervous system. So if we want to reset that or rebalance it, bring our stress load way down and help our body to be able to manage things again in a balanced way, do some gargling.
With anything?
Yeah, actually gargling with anything, singing even, is a good way of doing it because you're activating the vagus nerve, right? So you're stimulating the vagus nerve, which runs right through the neck and the thyroid area there.
So you could sing, gargle. What about tapping? Tapping also.
You could do tapping.
You've done one of these numbers before.
Tapping, I love tapping.
Tapping kind of helps you relieve stress. I don't know why I don't do this more often. Should I be worried about parasites?
If you're creating a terrain and you have a supportive team that is providing for you the best opportunity to have a terrain that is going to be inhospitable for parasites, no.
Okay.
But you should we should always be aware, right? We should always be aware of how our body's fluctuating and how conditions are affecting us. But I would say if you've had a condition for a very long time, you've had symptomology of fatigue, maybe a little bit of gut dysregulation, fogginess, mental concentration, difficulty sleeping, even like odd dreams. Like here's a story about a parasite. Okay, parasites are literally like living off the host. So there's an ant, and I think I've told this story before, but there's a zombie ant is what it's called. It's called the zombie ant in South America. And if it gets infected, what it will do is the infectious agent takes over the nervous system of the ant. And instead of it doing its specific work, which ants, if you've ever seen ants, they're very organized and they know exactly the specific work. They're going to a specific place and they're giving instructions and they're coming right back, right? But what will happen if this specific ant gets infected is it will climb up to a specific height on a tree, and it will go all the way out on the branch, and with a death grip and its pincers, it will pinch on the underside of a leaf until the organism grows and expands and basically consumes the ant itself. Okay? So that essentially is a parasitic infection, right? So you think about parasites. If you're having crazy, interesting dreams that don't make a lot of sense, and you're having other correlating symptoms with regards to your gut, your GI, and fatigue, it's very possible you have a parasite.
Man, I had a wild dream last night. It's time for a test.
There you go. Well, we better do it, right?
All right. Well, that, I believe, concludes this episode.
Namaste, everyone.
I'll be well now. Namaste.
Namaste.
Ooh, we have the applause and the song.
That was pretty impressive. I think that was our best applause yet. Oh, double. There we go.